Hey everyone, I'm Ermysenigma, welcome back to my channel and welcome to Monster Analysis. Up for analysis today is Petro Loa. Sambacadabra mixed Baltasar cells with her own to create something like a personal bodyguard, but then the result, Petro Loa turned out to be a violent, unpredictable creature who will assault anyone who comes close, even Sambacadabra, his very own creator. And so here we have what was supposed to be a bodyguard turned violent and vicious, Petro Loa, who in my opinion has one of the most amazing designs. I absolutely love this design, although I'll admit I don't really see how this monster right here, this skinny little creature, combined with Baltasar, who although is quite buff, how do they make this really tanky, strong looking monster? That makes no sense to me. Nonetheless, it's a really amazing monster. And so this monster is nature based, so as of the time recording this video, there are a total of 22 nature legendary monsters. I'm going to be comparing Petro Loa to the remaining 21 nature legendary monsters. So for power, Petro has a power of 3498, which is the third highest of all the nature monsters, actually tied with Sylvanus. The two nature based monsters that are stronger are Apex, who has a power of 3509, and the Judgment, who has a power of 3542. And honestly, I kind of feel like the Judgment design wise has a closer body structure to Petro Loa, and in terms of who's the stronger monster, I feel like these two monsters are going to end up being rivals. Anyways, as for life, this monster has a life of 29,556, which actually puts him in 9th place along with monsters like the Judgment, Fightrier, and the Mestrinus. And as for speed, it boasts a speed of 3,432, which in the nature category puts him in 5th place along with monsters like Kiridar and General Alces, so a pretty good speed all around, a pretty good power, and a rather average life. As for his trait, he's immune to possession, which would definitely help him out against Lamu. And from other elements, this will definitely help him out against magic monsters and against some dark monsters, and also against Baba Yaga, who's an earth monster that can possess. And while in his own element it helps against Lamu, it really doesn't help him against someone like Sarah, who has stun skills, or General Alces, who also has stun skills and is a common nature defense monster. And I really wish this monster would have been immune to stun, because if this monster was immune to stun, he could have been way better. Not only would it help him against other elements, he also has a self skill, and anytime a monster has a self skill, they're basically immune to possession, so he could have been useful both against stunning monsters and possession monsters. Unfortunately though, he is immune to possession, and I say unfortunately, but this may work in your favor on certain wars, so it is what it is, and overall design, stats, and trait, I have to say, so far so good. Moving on to the skills, the ultimate attack is Cursed Collar. Deals heavy special damage to all enemies, may make all targets bleed, may poison all targets. Cursed Collar is a special based AoE that deals 55 damage to all of the enemy monsters, and it applies bleeding and poison. Now first off, I love that this skill is special based. I don't understand why the damage output is so low. 55 is rather low, at the same time it does apply to DOTs, bleeding and poison, which when combined together, they're going to take away 20% of the enemy's health for the next 3 turns, and then poison lasts an extra turn, so that's an extra 10%. And not to mention that each negative effect reduces the enemy's damage output by 20%. So other than that weak initial damage, I have no arguments. Bleeding and poison are great DLTs that can kill the enemy monsters if the initial damage doesn't kill them, and most likely it probably won't if you use this on the first turn. If you use it during the middle of the battle, then it probably will. In skills group 1, the only skill worth talking about is Small Mouths. 50% chance of making all targets bleed, 50% chance of poisoning all targets. It's a special based skill, however it deals no damage, it costs 26 stamina, and it also has no cooldown, so you can spam the skill as much as you want. The bad thing about this skill is that it's only a 50% chance to bleed and poison. Now if you could actually land the bleeding and poison, that would be phenomenal, because the enemy's damage output is significantly reduced. But the problem with this skill is that it deals no initial damage, and considering you're probably going to want to give this monster some strength runes to maximize damage output, this skill in my opinion is rather useless. So even if you were thinking about having a teammate that can give you increased accuracy, and then using Small Mouths, yes you could do that, but honestly I wouldn't recommend it. So with that out of the way, we can move on to skills group 2. This dark based attack isn't worth talking about, so moving on over to the next skill, Loa's Will. Gains position, gains double damage, requires cooldown. So here we have a self skill, 28 stamina, 3 turn cooldown, quite a high cooldown, but it gives you increased accuracy and double damage, so it's a really nice setup skill, and it's once again the reason I said, if this monster was immune to stun, this could have been a phenomenal monster. Because can you just imagine going up against a Lamu, and Lamu happens to possess your Petro Loa? Doesn't matter, you just set up for the next attack, you get increased accuracy, and you get double damage. And then you're going to see in skills group 3, this monster has a really powerful attack. And a couple benefits to running this skill is if you're ever blinded, the precision will override the blinded, and if you ever have a damage reduction, the double damage I believe can override damage reduction, so it's a really good way to rid yourself of those negative effects. And so overall, some of you may want to run this skill, and some of you may not want to run this skill and instead run the following skill. Guarana Roots removes all negative status effects from itself, heals by 30% and gets regeneration, requires cooldown. Here we have another self skill, it costs 30 stamina, this time only with a 2 turn cooldown, and this skill has 3 effects. You heal by 30%, you remove any debuff you may have. This is really good against the nature category because a lot of nature monsters tend to poison you, and if you're poisoned, not only do you lose health, your damage output is also affected, and you also gain life regeneration, so for the next 3 turns, you're going to recover 20% of your health. And so for many of you, you're going to have to decide which of these 2 skills do you want. Do you want double damage and increased accuracy, or do you want healing by 30%, life regeneration, and removing any debuff? Keep in mind that this only has a 2-turn cooldown, which means you can reset that life regeneration if you need to, and you're also going to heal yourself and remove any more debuffs. So let's just say it was a really long battle, you could pretty much have life regeneration throughout the whole entire game if you needed to. Personally, my preference is Rrabbits, just because I'm really not a fan of setup skills, and instead I prefer skills that can make my monster sustainable. Petro Loa is also the kind of monster you may want to consider getting a life rune, especially if you plan on using this monster on defense. If you can make him tanky and then he can self-heal, self-life regeneration, self-remove debuffs, he can be quite deadly running him with a strength rune, a life rune, and then a speed rune. He could honestly be pretty hard to kill. But like I said, the choice is ultimately up to you and your preferred playing style, because there actually is a huge reason to run Loa's Will, and that has to do with the skill in Skills Group 3. Mouths to Feed deals very heavy damage to all enemies, requires cooldown. It's a special based attack that deals 50 damage, 36 stamina cost, 3-turn cooldown. Can you imagine setting up with Loa's Will? You have increased accuracy and double damage, so you're not going to be missing, and Mouths to Feed is basically a 100 damage special based AoE. This is going to wipe out the whole enemy team. For sure guaranteed, it's that powerful. So if you're the kind of player that likes setup skills, if you're the kind of player that will team up this monster with someone that can AoE deny, you can set up for the next turn, maybe you can deny again with your 3rd monster. When it's Petro Loa's turn again, Mouths to Feed, all of the enemy is wiped out. Just keep in mind that in Team Wars, you can't always use the right team, you can't always use the right setup, which is why my personal preference I make builds to Team Wars is Rrabbits. And so anyways, this is a really good skill, I would definitely recommend running it. Next up in Skills Group 3 we have Zomba Falso. Deals very heavy dark damage, may make target bleed, requires cooldown. Here we have a dark based attack. I actually forgot to mention that, even though this is a nature monster, because it's one of those fusion monsters like Vampirium was, this monster has elemental attacks from both of the monsters used, so it has dark attacks from Baltasar, and it has nature attacks from Sambacadabra, and overall it happens to be a nature monster, and I'm just realizing now it actually got Baltasar straight. Baltasar is immune to possession, so I guess that makes a lot more sense why this monster actually is immune to possession instead of something like immune to stun. So this monster takes different traits from the monsters used to create it. Anyways, going back to this skill, it's a dark based attack that deals 65 damage to a single enemy, 31 stamina cost with a 3-turn cooldown, and it applies bleeding. Bleeding, as many of you know, no one currently in the game is immune to it, and it's essentially the exact same thing as poison. And I gotta say that I really love when a monster has other elemental based attacks, because not only is this good against nature monsters, you now also have an elemental advantage against earth monsters. And also a monster with this much power that also has a powerful skill, and the skill also applies to DOT, you can pretty much guarantee whatever monster you attack, they're probably gonna die. And keep in mind that if that monster doesn't die from the initial damage output, and if instead they die from the DOT, the next monster in their turn order, their turn is going to be skipped. So make sure to use that to your advantage, because sometimes they could also backfire. And it's because that you can utilize that strategy of skipping the next monster's turn. I have to say that I love this monster, I love that it can do that. I love that you can build this monster specifically to skip the next monster in the turn order. And even though I find the cooldown to be extremely high, you should definitely still run this skill. Next up we have Wuxia Yatai Leaves, deals massive nature damage, may poison target, requires cooldown. So here we have a nature based attack that deals 70 damage, 31 stamina cost, 3-turn cooldown, and it applies poison. So it's 5 points stronger than the dark version, however instead of applying bleeding, it applies poison. And the downside to that is that some monsters, many nature monsters, are immune to poison. However, if you were to use this skill against any non-nature monster attack, once again you can pretty much guarantee you're going to OTK them, and if you don't even OTK them, the poison will finish them off. And so overall, it appears that this monster is just really good at single target kills. Whether it be the dark based attack or the nature based attack, whatever monster you target, they're pretty much dead. And actually, if you're willing to wait 2 turns, if you set up with Loa's Will and follow it up with Mouths to Feed, then this monster can potentially kill all of the enemy monsters. Now let me just say, the bad thing about these skills having a 3-turn cooldown is that you really can't cycle. Originally I was going to recommend all of Skills Group 3 and Rrabbits, but see the thing is, if you start the game off with Mouths to Feed, that's only 50 damage to the enemy monsters, right? They're not going to die. So then if you use these skills on 2 enemy monsters, that's 2 enemy monsters dead, and because all these skills have a 3-turn cooldown, you're not going to be able to cycle, so you're going to have to recover your life, remove negative debuffs, whatever. And likewise, if you start the game off with one of these 2 powerful skills, then you only have these 2 skills to choose from. So assuming you use both of these skills to take out the enemy monsters, then there's only 1 monster alive. There's really no reason to use Mouths to Feed on just 1 enemy monster. If that's the case, you might argue it's better to run the dark based 45 damage attack that has no cooldown, that way you always have a skill to use. But at the same time, you can completely discount that argument when you consider that it's always a 3-on-3, it's never a 1-on-1. I mean, sometimes it is on one-on-one, but that's only after the game has gone on for a while. You always start the game off with 3 monsters versus 3 monsters. So considering Petro Loa is going to be the attacker in a team of 3, one of your monsters is going to be your deny monster, and then your third monster can be whatever you want it to be. Maybe it's a supporter, maybe it's another attacker. If that third monster is a supporter that can give you increased accuracy and double damage, then you definitely want to have mouths to feed, because with this skill you can easily eliminate all of the enemy monsters. If that third monster happens to be an attacker, in that case it's better to have these 2 skills. That way Petro Loa can take out one of the enemy monsters, and then your other attacker can take out the other enemy monster. In which case then it'd be a 3 against 1 battle. And in my opinion, you should still definitely have Gonada Roots, just in case something goes wrong, just in case you need the self-sustaining skill to heal yourself, to give yourself life regeneration. I think you'll find that if you run the skill, it'll definitely come in handy. And honestly, if you want to use this monster for defense, this is probably the best skill set to use. So I'm going to stick with my original recommendation: Gonada Roots, Mouths to Feed, Zompa Faso, and Busha Yatai Leaves. And considering this monster is an attacker, you want to go the typical attacker rune setup: 2 strength runes and a speed rune, or 2 strength runes and a team speed rune. If you partner up with this monster with a supportive monster, you want to make sure that your supportive monster is faster than Petro Loa to give that double damage and increased accuracy. And so yeah, that's going to conclude my analysis of Petro Loa. Please let me know what you guys think about this monster, and how do you think he compares to the other nature monsters, specifically to the nature attackers. How do you think he compares to the Judgment? Do you think the Judgment is better? Or do you think Petro Loa is a good contender and might possibly be better than the Judgment? Please let me know the answers to that question in the comments below, and if you can, please also defend your answer. And anyways, as of the time making this video, there is going to be a breeding event for Petro Loa, so to those of you watching the video just when it was released, best of luck to all of you getting this monster. Hopefully you're able to breed him, and hopefully many of you are able to get multiples of them, maybe 2 or 3, that way you can rank him up. In that case, he can definitely be a really powerful nature attacker. But regardless of when you're watching this video, just best of luck to all of you on your Monster Legends adventures. With that being said, I'm Ermysenigma. Like always, remember to dream big and pursue your passions.